Before we begin, thank you very much to Sean W. for joining the Patreon campaign. Thank you very much for the contribution. Thank you very much for supporting the channel. Always appreciated. Always appreciated. You know, that puts us, funny enough, that actually puts us into March with the shoutouts. I'm finally getting that caught up. So if you've been waiting, hopefully around the corner, I tell you, I've got maybe about a week and a half's worth left. I feel like I'm back in the shout out streak. I don't know how long we've been going on since the convoy thing started. Feels like we're back to just doing this every single day and never getting to use my intro anymore. But sacrifices. Thank you very much. We are going to be discussing G.I. Joe today, or specifically the crossovers with the Transformers. So, we're going to get to it at the end, but there is a particular reason why this has popped into my head today. But in general, it's been the dream of the boys' toy collectors for literally decades. In the 80s, there were two kings of the, there were several kings of the toy aisle in the 80s. Transformers came along and trumped everything. That was a complete and utter shift in all popular market. That said, G.I. Joe was right there neck and neck with it. And because they're both Hasbro brands, people have been asking literally for almost 4 decades, when are we going to get the two together? It made all the sense in the world. We got comic books crossing them over, but we did not get actual toys, which is what everyone wanted. So, the cover you see here is from the early 90s run of the Snake Eyes comic book. It's a crossover with the G2 comic book that was going on at the time. But that said, Hasbro, at least the creative side of Transformers, was flirting with this all the way back in 1986. Old Snake showed up in the original Transformer cartoon in the episode Only Human, and they really didn't hide anything very well. Okay, it's a terrorist with a silver face mask named Old Snake with Chris Latta's raspy gravel but also high-pitched voice. It was Cobra Commander. There's no way of disguising it other than there were legal reasons why it couldn't just be Cobra Commander. It was weird. It was really weird times. But that said, it planted that seed, and we've been asking for it ever since. Now, they flirted with the idea in the early 90s. We know this prototype existed at one point, which was a G2 style Transformer that would have been G.I. Joe compatible. There would have been a spot here for a G.I. Joe 3 3/4 inch figure to actually ride. It would have had gimmickry based on being something that a G.I. Joe character could interact with. It was all going to work. It was all going to be a really cool thing for us to finally get. And then for whatever reason, this prototype never made it past this stage. The consensus is that, at least from everybody who was working in the company at the time, there was never a point where it felt like they needed to do that. It always kind of harkened to one brand or the other being way more successful than the other at the time. G.I. Joe technically lasted longer than Transformers, but they kind of tend to revitalize and die out at the same time. The only exception was Transformers during the 90s, where G.I. Joe Extreme didn't go farther than a year, but Beast Wars lasted a solid 3 or 4 years and then moved on into a sequel to close out the decade. And you can't really do a G.I. Joe crossover then. So they've always just been kind of parallel in success, and one never really needed the other. That was their excuse anyway. It doesn't mean they didn't try. Here and there, we did get little tastes of what could be. In Energon, we got Snowcat, who's not only named after the vehicle from the G.I. Joe toy line, but is also designed based on it. This was the closest we got for a long time. It's a nice little homage. It's not a direct copy of the Snowcat vehicle, but it was close enough. Like, this was the first time they actually gave us something of a crossover. Now, if you want something a little bit more direct and overt, we had a repainted Power Glide called Viper, who is literally a Cobra Viper. And yeah, like, this one actually has Cobra faction symbols on it. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. Now this is a lot closer to what we were asking for. Meanwhile, the Collector Club would eventually gift us with Serpent OR. This is a genius repaint of the Rat-Bat retool of Generation Scourge, because it's based off of the comic book Rat-Bat, the Senator Rat-Bat, where he's still robotic and has this vaguely bat-like helmet. But painted gold, it absolutely looks like Serpentor. It's a genius figure. So here and there, we got little tastes of what could be. We knew it was now possible for the brands to kind of connect, but they didn't want to do anything concrete with it. No, to do anything that strict, to do anything that is like just dedicated, this truly is G.I. Joe and Transformers at the same time. Because these are homage paint jobs. And Serpent Noir is a character who only exists in, club comics. So it doesn't really apply that much. So what do we go to the other things that FunPub was doing? Because while they were running BotCon and the Collectors Club, where this came from, they were also doing JoeCon, an official G.I. Joe convention. And that one also had exclusives. So we get things like this. So this is Marissa Fairborn on Afterbreaker, which is a G.I. Joe motorcycle that has been repainted into Technobot Afterburner. This was one of the earliest, probably I think this is like the earliest time that we got a toy that was G.I. Joe and Transformers on the same packaging, like completely concrete, as like a one thing. And you'll notice, one, it's expensive. For a one modern style G.I. Joe figure of Marissa Fairborn, granted, Marissa Fairborn's only real toy, and a G.I. Joe vehicle that absolutely does not look like the Technobot other than they painted it orange. Yeah, you can cough up $150 to own that. Clearly there's a market. Like, this is one of those things that sold out immediately, went to the aftermarket, and immediately climbed in demand. What do you mean we're getting G.I. Joe Transform? What do you mean they're actually doing this? It was really cool. It was really cool to know it was possible. And it didn't even have to be like marquee characters, These are technically both Transformer characters. They're just using G.I. Joe toys to come to life. This was a start of something. And they figured it out too. So later on, we got the Old Snake multi-pack, which not only has our first official toy of Old Snake, which again, technically a Transformer character, we also got Soundwave from Transformers Prime, repainted into two Cobra bats. And I think that is one of the best ideas for a repaint you possibly could have done. It's genius, and they look fantastic. And I wish it wasn't $300 for the set. I'm not a G.I. Joe guy per se, but I do really like the Cobra bats. I do like those little robot soldiers. Those I like. So this would have been great. I remember trying for this set, and it's too expensive. It's just too expensive all around to get these boys. It's still cool that they did it, though. Like, again, proof that this actually had demand. And we continue this with the San Diego Comic-Con exclusives. Now, if I've misarranged the order of what came first, the JoeCon Collector Club exclusive stuff or the San Diego Comic-Con stuff, I apologize. It's been a day. But you could go to San Diego Comic-Con and get your hands on a G.I. Joe Sky Striker that's been repainted into Starscream and comes with a Cobra Commander. It's the Chris Latta 2-pack. And again, the price on it is high. the price on it is crazy high. I know this one's out of the UK, so you'd think like, okay, well, shipping from the UK makes it more expensive. There's others that are comparable. This is just like the better visual example. It's incredible. Like there was, again, an instant sellout and instantly a secondhand market for it. And this continued. They really liked doing things like this. You know, we eventually got the Shockwave Hiss tank, which is, again, a really cool thing to have. That's a really cool thing to exist. Again, not cheap. Not cheap. Clearly, there is an interest and a demand for this. So when it came time to do these for real, we kind of all expected this to be the easiest shoe-in in Hasbro's existence, you know? We're doing stuff collaborative, you know, so we add to that line, but we don't have to go outside our perimeters for it. It's all in-house. You know, we can have multiple iconic characters kind of coming together here. So this was a pretty exciting thing when we started finding out that, yes, we're getting official, real G.I. Joe Transformers on a retail level. But it starts rough. So from here on out, we're going to go to more examination than history, and I'm going to give you kind of where my thoughts are on this whole concept. But starting off with the Hiss Tank Megatron was a very rough start. On paper, it's great. Okay, you get Megatron and the Baroness. So you're talking, you know, one of the most popular Joe characters with the leader of the Decepticons. Seems to work. However, the toy itself was poorly received, called crude engineering, very cheap feeling. It's a very large toy, but very hollowed out. You can see how hollowed out the thighs are from here. There isn't even a whole lot of plastic as support structure. It's just a big hollow figure. And there's a lot of reasons for this. For the first release, a Hiss tank that turns into Megatron seems completely ideal. The problem is trying to split the difference between looking like a Hiss tank and looking like Megatron. So, personally, I think you have to keep the Hiss tank black because traditionally it is black. However, I don't see why Megatron had to be gray. It felt like they did this toy the way they did so that the G1 Megatron stood out, very, very strongly. So you get the character as much as possible into this toy, despite the two being different colors. And that's where the problem lies. So I understand it has to be big because it has to be able to be 3 3/4 inch figure compatible. That's all well and good. I accept that. However, you could also argue that it's like the reason why this didn't work is because of the way they tried to split this. If Megatron had just been black, and we've had black Megatrons in the past, that's not a different thing. If we just made Megatron black and didn't try to stick so close to the G1 depiction, you wouldn't have this weird amalgamation where he's basically wearing the shell of a Hiss tank hanging off of his frame, just so he can collapse into a little ball and the Hiss tank can wrap around him. He's a shell former. Like, most of what you see there on his robot mode does not make up any bulk of the vehicle mode. It's just the shell and kibble hanging off of him that's doing all the work. And it's one reason why I think the toy feels so jank and cheap. Like, in order to get all of those parts needed to do this, like, black Hiss tank but gray Megatron, you had to hollow the toy out just to make budget. If you had incorporated the vehicle mode into his robot mode more and just left Megatron be black this time, you wouldn't have had to engineer around so many hoops. More of the vehicle could have incorporated into the robot. And because of that, you're using less parts. You're using the toy more dynamically, which means it'd be more fun to mess with, but you'd probably have room in the budget to make it a little bit more solid on the same in the same way. So it came across as just the engineering felt very insufficient, and the toy itself felt very cheap, despite like a $90 price point because of how big it was and how much you were getting. And then there's Bumblebee, which is almost the opposite problem. So this time they did incorporate the Transformer and the vehicle a lot better. I don't think you had an option in the case of Bumblebee. But here he's almost barely showing through. The robot mode parts of Bumblebee don't really look very Bumblebee. You know, it looks like you could have tacked on any Transformer head and, you know, whatever their main color is, and this just could have been them. I could have easily have made this into a hound just by not painting the yellow at all and sticking a hound head on there. I could have made this a Rodimus by making all that yellow red, putting his head on there and putting yellow on those big flaps hanging out in his back. And that again kind of brings up the other issue. Again, the toy just does not feel very well engineered. For what we know, this was handled by the G.I. Joe team, which doesn't have a whole lot of experience making a vehicle turn into a robot, so that might have been part of this. But just having these gigantic tires hanging off of Bumblebee that made his articulation very cumbersome and weird, yeah, that hurt the toy. You know, and it just ended up being like not the best looking and not the best playing. So 2 strikes so far. Now, we finally seemed like we were getting somewhere with the Thunder Machine. Soundwave is already blue, so turning him into the Thunder Machine was perfect. You know, I'm not entirely sold on the idea of pairing him with the Dreadnoks. This doesn't seem quite his style, but you know what? I'll give them credit. I think this is the one that visually works best out of any of them, and it splits all the differences. It allows Soundwave to be blue. It allows the vehicle to incorporate into the robot mode. Frankly, if this was the first one out of the gate, I think it would have had a much better reception. But from what I've been told, now granted, this is the only one I don't own, so my handling of this toy has been very limited. But from what I know, this toy was kind of suffering from the same issues. Obviously, they were handling the kibble better. There's only 2 tires in the way now, but they're relatively small at least. But for the most part, you still had this rickety feel. You know, like it felt like they had to make these toys basically engineering-wise as cheap as possible to get the engineering for everything in there and to still include a 3 3/4 inch action figure. And this time incorporating a Cobra painted Ravage. Okay. Well, do you still have the Baroness from the Megatron release? Then you can you can do the scenes from the crossover comics the way they've always wanted to do a toy. Do you think they did that set at one point, or they tried to do that set at one point? One or the other. Now, let's get to the final one so far. This one is actually the entire reason why I'm doing this video. So, Cup as the Triple T. I got this at a GameStop pretty cheap. So, I know it's not like super bargain bin cheap compared to like people who got to find these at Ross. But after like a few markdowns, a little bit more for a beat up box, a little bit more because I have reward points. So we just stacked things on top of each other until this thing was closer to $50 than it was its original $90 price point. And for that, I keep hearing this is the best one, so I'll take a shot on it. And guess what? It is the best one. It's got ratcheted joints. It has solid construction. There isn't any like obvious hollowing on parts on his arms and legs. And it's a character that fits well. I mean, Cup feels like the only character who would be in with a bunch of old, like old-time American soldiers. Like, it just fits. Theme-wise, it fits. And yeah, the toy is even probably the best engineered of any of them. It feels more like a modern Transformer in that it knows where to hide its parts. Outside of still has a fairly chunky backpack, but okay, we'll accept that at this point. It's the best they've done to this point. All right. So, yeah, like Cup, messing around with Cup the other night just kind of made me wonder, like, well, where did this go wrong? Like, how did so many of these toys end up lame to the point where where like the most anticipated toy crossover of all time only got 4 figures, and only one of them seems to be accepted as good, not even great, just good. It really just feels like a miss of marketing, not only in like delivery, but also a miss in basic engineering. With Takara not involved, that does mean that the toys themselves are going to be not quite as clean, not quite as presented as the Transformer toys usually are, which is going to hurt things in the overrun. I genuinely feel like it misses the spirit of what we wanted, you know? If I were in charge, if I had a say in this, yeah, like we would do a black Megatron from the Hiss tank just so it would actually be a lot more solid in its design. You know, we would put more emphasis on getting an Optimus Prime out. Like there's a toy line where a Megatron exists, but an Optimus Prime doesn't. That feels weird and wrong. You know, if it was me, like, this really should have been an entire toy line. Like, this should have been a sub-line. Instead of having a G.I. Joe line out, you would have a G.I. Joe Transformer line out, where it's 3.75-inch figures. I'd probably go with modern ones, not O-ring, because I like my toys to survive the ravages of time. And I would most likely decorate them as like, it's classic characters, but I would put the influence of Transformer characters in their design deco to give them some uniqueness. You know, I might give Duke some like red and blue body armor that is vaguely Optimus Prime coded, not to the super cheesy crossover extent of like the He-Man toys that are coming out right now, but just enough to where like it still looks like something like a super soldier would wear, but yeah, vaguely Transformer-ish in design. I'd give them little guns and accessories that are based off of the accessories of Transformers. Duke might have a rifle that is shaped like Optimus Prime's, or, you know, one of the Joes would have like a little blaster accessory to carry around. Things like that, you know, like toyetic things that would convey the crossover. You know, the vehicles, like the transforming vehicles, they would incorporate better. We wouldn't be like so hard on like it has to look like the Transformer character. Just go about making it the best robot you can. You know, and even if it has to be an original character, that's fine. You know, we saw that was the original plan in the 90s. It doesn't have to be Optimus. It doesn't have to be Megatron. It just has to be a cool transforming toy, you know, without having to like dedicate yourself to making it someone else. It's the beauty of collabs. They usually don't structure themselves that way, so they're more free to just make something that looks good. And I'd like to have some kind of mid-range where like things are done up kind of like the way Viper is, where okay, let's do a Hound toy that is just G.I. Joe coded. It doesn't have to scale, it doesn't have to be there, but it's just there to kind of convey that idea. You know, you sneak a modern Energon Snowcat into it, for instance. That would be funny. You do, you know, deco, you know, you do basic decos like of like motorcycle transformers that the G.I. Joes could ride on, you know, small vehicles, you know, as original toys. There's room for this to have been completely done as its own toy line, and I really feel like it should have been done. It's basically just running a G.I. Joe toy line, except the bigger toys transform. That's basically the only thing you would have had to have done. But we got what we got, and it doesn't look like we're going to get any more. And it's unfortunate. Like, I hate seeing, and this happens so often, is when the best toys in a line come at the very tail end. As soon as they figure out exactly what they're doing, that's when the line dies. You know, I put that onto like Titanium, where RID Optimus came way too late to save that line's reputation. You know, and Cup here kind of did the same thing. So, those are the thoughts of the day. This was what could have been the best crossover in toy history. And it's just a sad whimper that I don't think G.I. Joe or Transformer fans really enjoyed all that much. But then again, that's just my opinion. So let me know what you thought of Transformers G.I. Joe in the comment section below. Are you hoping for more collabs, or is it better to just scrap it and try again some other time? You guys let me know, and as always, I will see you next time.
Hello everyone, I am Astral Agent Magnetar, a Tokusatsu VTuber, and I am streaming 4 times a week over on Twitch, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday afternoons, and a special late night one on late Friday/early Saturday. So come watch, come hang out, and let's make an impact together.